All right, let's start out with Gianni today since it's Mother's Day. Gianni, they are killing mothers in Puerto Rico. Tell us, mothers and
Yes,
daughters in Puerto
mothers
Rico.
and
Tell us what's
daughters
going
and
on. What's going on?
sisters. Yes. So recently there's been an influx in women murders. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Female murders.
Called, yeah, murders called femicides in Puerto Rico. Hundreds in the island of Puerto Rico are mourning the death of a woman named Keishla Ortiz, a 27-year-old woman who was killed by the father of her child while she was pregnant. Um, the federal grand jury indicted Puerto Rican boxer Felix Sanchez in her killing. The news actually came after another killing of a woman named Andrea Costas, who was 34 years old, and she was killed by her partner. Her body was found partially burned a month after she had sought a protective order against the man she had dated for 8 months. So this year alone, there has been at least 21 femicides since 2010 in Puerto Rico. More than 150 women have been killed by their intimate partners. And last year, 6 transgender women were murdered, the highest number in any US state or territory. So the murders of Andrea and Isla have led to yet another wave of the country, with Puerto Ricans demanding that the government do something, anything, to protect women. But there's no simple fix. The epidemic isn't ending anytime soon, so this is like basically it's a multifaceted issue at this time. My question to the panel is, what could the slew of female-related murders in Puerto Rico be linked to?
What could it be linked to?
Yeah, like what could be the cause of yeah.
All right, let's start with Robbie.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for sharing this story because I had no idea that this was going on in Puerto Rico, Johnny. And as I was reading up on it and just brushing up so I could be ready for this, one of the things that really stuck out at me was the prevalence of machismo or machista, as it was referred to in the article, which is just, I mean, machoism. It's toxic masculinity. And when values like that are embraced culturally, it can breed very toxic individuals who feel justified in treating women however they want because that's the manly thing to do. Um, I think that that's definitely a factor, but why we're seeing such a spike in, I think in the article you were it referred to as far back as 2018 that there's been like a real increase in femicide. Um, so I mean, poverty, socioeconomic factors always come into play. In this last year with the COVID pandemic, I mean, even some of the most well-adjusted people I know don't have their heads on right at this time. So I would imagine someone who is suffering, who doesn't have the supports from the state or society as they require, it's it breeds a very dangerous environment for women, especially when, like I was saying, if it's culturally acceptable, that's a big part of the issue.
All right, what are your thoughts, Lizzie?
Why does it look like my camera's all slow? Um, I think that in addition to this being something, that has become an outbreak, if you will, on the island of Puerto Rico, it's Puerto Rico is a part of the United States, so it's a national problem. But it's also an international problem. It's a worldwide problem. Women all over the world are dying at the hands of their male partners, at the hands of men. Um, and so I don't know, like Gianni said, I don't know. I don't think that there is a quick fix for this. There still is a lack of respect for women in this world. There is this idea that women are still considered chattel, still in some respects considered property, especially if you're talking about a woman who's in an intimate or domestic relationship with another male. And so um, I'm not surprised by these numbers. I'm surprised that they're calling it something else. I mean, because normally we just consider it or hear the term domestic violence or murder. Um, but it's a real problem. And I think what a lot of people need to realize and understand is that, there are a lot of opinions about women who are in abusive relationships, who are in relationships where they are being physically beaten or intimidated by their partners. And um, one of the things that people don't consider is that they are more likely to be attacked and or killed when they try to get away. Like, a lot of people always ask the question, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she stay? X, Y, Z. They're more likely to be killed when they leave, when they are trying to get away. That's
Hmm.
why there are shelters. That's why, there are places, safe havens for them to try to get away so that their partners can't get to them. But this is a huge problem. This is a huge problem, and a one that I don't necessarily know how we even begin to address, except for, I guess, at the adolescent level, in teaching young men to get a rein on their emotions, to teaching young men that women, they are not owed anything by women, teaching young men that people are allowed to say no to them. But other than that, in terms of law enforcement, that's a tricky question. That's a tricky question. I don't know how we would even begin to address that.
Yeah. My thoughts are, so I had to look up machismo and what it was, similar to Robbie, and it says the origin of machismo can be traced back. Um, the reason I looked it up because I wanted to know where it came from, because it is somewhat cultural. Um, but I'll get to my point on this. So the origin of machismo can be traced back to pre-Columbian times and has been influenced by both indigenous and European forms of masculinity, along with its association with sexual flair. Machismo has come to represent male dominance. Now, it's considered a cultural thing. Machismo and the Latino cultures, they tend to attack women, but as Lizzie said, that is not relegated to Latino cultures. That's like a
Right.
worldwide thing. I mean, it happens in African
Hmm.
cultures. It happens in European cultures. Um, it literally happens in all. It happens in the U.S. I mean, of course, U.S.
It's happening to my friend right now.
U.S. works as
Yeah,
a
it's
melting pot, supposedly, but so of course it comes from all over. But it is a worldwide problem. I mean, I was surprised that this was happening in Puerto Rico the way it has. I mean, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, so not that that makes a huge difference, but it should be a difference. We're not talking about somewhere in South America or somewhere in Mexico. I know we heard about it in Mexico a lot. We're talking about this happening in the United States, um,
but it's not even really taken that seriously
and it's
by
not. That's a problem.
law enforcement or by even by adults,
Yeah,
even in the mainland, even in the 50 states here. So I'm not shocked that it's happening in Puerto Rico. I mean, it happens a lot in Mexico. It happens a lot in Central America. It's seriously a worldwide problem. Worse in some areas of the world than in others, because in some areas of the world, certain violence against women is legal.
hmm
um,
Yeah.
it's it's a huge problem. I'm glad that one, we're talking about this, and that this story is being brought to the front page as it relates to being on the island of Puerto Rico. But it's one of those things, even within families, that if you think about it, you think about that person that you may suspect be in a domestic violence situation, maybe being abused. It's something that nobody talks about. It's taboo.
it's quiet.
It's hush hush. And so that's one of the reasons why it's allowed to go on for so long.
Yeah.
So, Gianni,
Right.
what are your thoughts? Being a young college student.
Um, I think following what you guys said about like machismo and that kind of like macho behavior, it just means kind of like it's Puerto Rico is basically conservative in a way where the women are expected to choose the right partner, and if they choose a partner that beats them or cheats on them and beats them, then that's their fault, and they have to put up with the consequences. like you guys said, that happens to a lot of ethnic countries, a lot of places. It's very popular. I was just interested in figuring out why specifically is this happening in Puerto Rico. And I think Rob did it. I think you made a good point about like the socioeconomic issue where pandemic is happening now. Maybe the partners are closer together, so it's easier for things to get volatile. I don't know, but it's just interesting. I'm just shouting out the little beautiful island of Puerto Rico. They've been doing really bad lately. I think Liz mentioned they've had hurricanes and things like that. Just
Yeah.
shout out to Puerto Rico.
I mean, I like Robbie's point in terms of, the fact that right now with the pandemic, they're stuck inside. That's another worldwide issue that we're not discussing is that domestic violence rates went up drastically with the pandemic. We got stuck inside.
Yeah.
Domestic, and those were underreported. If you consider they
Yeah.
went up and it was underreported, how many people were abused within families? Um, Now, I do want to reiterate that just because it's male on female violence, that female on male violence doesn't happen is not true. It does happen. So, but
Yeah.
overall, the domestic violence rates went up. I mean, that's something that we're not even really talking about. It was discussed, but it's not really talked about. Not really talked about.
Again, agreed. That goes back to my point. Like we weren't talking about it a lot before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So why would we expect the government or law enforcement or um, people within families to talk about it, post pandemic? Again, it's something that is swept under the rug. I have several friends who, over the course of my adult life, who have been in domestic violence relationships. I tell my students all the time. I teach freshman students at Howard. I teach high school students with the School of the New York Times, and I tell my students a lot of this behavior starts when you're a teenager. It starts in
Yes.
teenage relationships, carries over into college, and then carries over into adulthood. And so it's something that no one really wants to discuss, but it's out there and it is killing a lot of people. A
Yeah.
lot of people.
All right. You know what that means? It's time to get to our comments online. We
What
got
the ginger?
Sorry, I went too far and I saw one of the earlier comments. I'm looking at Jose. It says, seriously, you need to learn how to twerk. Talking about Gingy. Your comment about twerking. All right. Uh, Olivia says, this woman has been so disrespected. We can create life. We are powerful beings on earth. Jacqueline Robinson says, machismo is definitely a factor as well as the cultural acceptance of it. No
Yeah.
question. Jose, it's never that easy to leave the abusive partner. Sadly, easier said than done. And something needs to get done worldwide. That's a very good point. It is hard to, there are situations where not only are you dependent on them, but you have children with them, with
Hmm.
abusive people, and you're trying to be in the best interest of your kids. Um, there's a lot of different reasons that it's difficult to leave, or sometimes it's just a emotional. Um, if you grew up in an abusive household, it feels right. You know,
It's generational.
yeah,
It's
it's just
generational.
it's like
If your
right.
mom getting abused
Hmm.
by your
Hmm.
dad or by an uncle or by her boyfriend or
It's
whatever,
what you
you
know.
think it's what you know. You think that's how adult relationships are supposed to play out.
It's an expression of
It's
love.
Yeah.
Hmm.
there's also a level of
Yeah,
brainwashing,
yeah,
and or if you call it Stockholm syndrome,
very good point.
where
That's
people are
exactly what I was going to
listening.
say. Stockholm syndrome. Yeah.
People are, groomed to believe what their abuser is telling them. Again, I have friends who have been in these situations, and as they were starting to come out, and you listen to what they've been told, how they've been told to think or see themselves, it's like amazing. You just stop and you're like, you can't really believe that, right? But they've been told this over and over and over with a fist to the head, a fist to the body for a number of years. And so that's how they start to see themselves. And they think they don't deserve anything better. So yeah, it's a horrible cycle. It's a
It is a
horrible
cycle.
cycle.
Yeah. So Michael says, pretty much the only culture where this kind of violence doesn't exist is the island where Wonder Woman lives.
Bonus points if anyone on the panel can name the island.
It's I forget how to say it. It's
Themyscira.
Themyscira. Yeah, Themyscira.
Oh, I would have never.
I just never. I could
Thought I
never
had it.
pronounce it. I know what it. I know when I see it. But, all right. So Olivia says, and sometimes it happens. Let's see. It's so sad that sometimes women wants and desires to be submissive, but is abused when they are taken advantage of, abused, and bullied. And sometimes it happens out of the. I don't know what blue is out of the blue. Okay, and just once, and never happens to them as a teenager or any other relationship. They're sometimes crazy about and they hide themselves. And Mike said y'all's nerds showed out. All right. Thank you for the topic, Gianni Storm. That was definitely a good topic. All right. Let's get into our next hot topic.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.